Another popular way to open files in Photoshop is through a panel called Mini Bridge. Mini Bridge is a separate panel that comes free with Photoshop or your Creative Cloud membership, but it gets installed when you install Bridge, not Photoshop. So if you haven't installed Bridge, please watch the video on installing it in the introduction section. Now you might have noticed a menu item under the File menu to browse in Mini Bridge. Or you might have noticed the Mini Bridge panel down in the lower left corner. If you can't see the Mini Bridge panel, you can show it by doing one of two things. Either selecting the Essentials workspace, and if you've got the Essentials workspace selected and you still don't see it, you can choose to reset the Essentials. Or you can go under the Window menu and then choose Extensions and then choose Mini Bridge. In order to expand Mini Bridge, I'll click on it once and you can see now I see the contents of Mini Bridge. Bridge does have to be running in order to use Mini Bridge, but if you choose to use Mini Bridge, Bridge will automatically launch behind the scenes. Now we can use the path bar across the top, or we can use this area right here in order to navigate to a different folder. In this case, I'll double click on Desktop and then Demo Files, and then I'll single click on Interface in order to see the contents of that folder as a film strip to the right. Now there are a lot of other options across the top here. I have a back button which I can navigate and a forward button. I also have the option to reveal this folder in Bridge. I have a lot of different options for selecting, and I can go into a slideshow mode or review mode. I can also decide what criteria I want to use in order to display my images. Over on the right-hand side, I can choose criteria to filter my images as well. So if I had a large number of images that I'd already gone through and rated some with 1 star or 2 star, this would make it very easy for me to hide all of the images that I didn't like, for example, all the ones that didn't have 2 stars, and I could either show 2 stars or more stars. There's also an area here where I can search. So there's a lot of power here. You don't actually have to jump to Bridge every time you need to open a file. Now, in order to open an image into Photoshop from Mini Bridge, all I need to do is double click on the thumbnail. If I don't want to work with that image, I simply close it by clicking on the check icon and the tab, or I could choose File and then Close. If I want to open a file that either is a RAW file or has Camera Raw file settings associated with it, then when I double click on it, it will launch the Camera Raw interface so that I could make changes to it and then open the image in Photoshop. If I want to open a second file, all I need to do is double click on it from Mini Bridge. We can see now that there are 2 files that are open, the one that we are currently viewing, as well as the one that's tucked behind it or nested with it by the tab. If I were to select an image and drag and drop it into the preview area, then Photoshop assumes that I want to add this second document to this first document, and when I release, you can see that it's placed the document in here, and when I click on the check mark, we can look in the Layers panel, and we'll notice that this document now has 2 layers. So it didn't open it as a separate document, it opened it as a separate layer within a single document. There's one final way that I can open up an image, and that is by clicking and dragging that image up to this tabbed area right here. If I release my cursor now, Photoshop knows that I don't want to add it to any other open documents, but instead I want it to open as its own document. You can see it's a single layer document, and I can still click through to my other files that are all open. All right, let's go ahead and close these images. I'm going to select File and then Close All. Photoshop's going to ask me if I want to save the changes. I'm going to say don't save the changes, and before I click that, I'm going to include that response to all of my images. So instead of having Photoshop ask me every time, do you want to save? Do you want to save? Do you want to save? I'm going to apply my response to all open documents and select Don't Save. So now that you know about Mini Bridge, I think that you'll find it to be a very useful way to navigate to different folders and open up files without ever having to leave the Photoshop interface.